since the main goal of this video series is figuring out the hikes on the island, I will analyze just 2 things in this episode: the off-island stuff and the opening scene. In the past episodes, we've had a lot of interesting, exciting and mythological stuff on the island. The off-island stuff we see in Season 5 is one of my criticisms of the season. I think they happened a bit bundled together and far too hastily. There was a beautiful pacing in Season 4's flash forwards, showing a lot of colors in the way our characters handled the life outside the island, but also how they were affected by John Locke's death. Jack's downward spiral was amazing, and so was Hurley's too. Sun's tougher shell as the boss of Pike Heavy Industries, Kate's life as a mom, and Saeed's life as the Iraqi James Bond. And don't forget the awesome hour of The Shape of Things to Come. When they are so multicentric as they are in the beginning of Season 5, I think they go by a little bit too quickly. The slow descent into alcoholism and depression for Jack is gone within minutes after flushing the pills and shaving the beard. I mean, this is like 12 hours before this.
All due respect, Mr. Reyes, but you brought him to me, so I'm gonna do what I think is best for Saeed.
All right, fine. Take him to the hospital.
Kate's impressive movements before leaving on that Guam flight, which includes a trip to the supermarket where she briefly lost Aaron, an 11-hour drive to Albuquerque to cry on Cassidy's couch, before doing that same drive back to Los Angeles to hand over Aaron to Claire's mother, before crashing at Jack's place. Kate's movements seems too unlikely, especially since she is not allowed to leave the state of California. Many fans start to deduce that Kate found out about Sawyer's daughter Clementine and the connection they both had to Cassidy, and tracked them down and found out that she was in Albuquerque but recently moved to someplace in California. That would make much more sense, right? So if we try to look at the scene, Cassidy lives at Lumiao Street, but no, Kate did not travel to Hawaii. This is a blooper from the set because the show is filmed in Oahu, Hawaii. So we can't get any clues from the scene, can we? Well, the production team did make it very clear that this happens in Albuquerque, since all the cars have New Mexico license plates. Cassidy's car, her neighbor, and this one over here. So by removing any classical Aloha Hawaiian license plates and making sure they have New Mexico license plates, with the exception of Kate's car, which has a California license plate. Well, that's pretty much a big clue that these scenes do take place in Albuquerque and that Cassidy did not move from this state to California. And Kate likely punched the gas, breaking several laws to get to New Mexico in that short time span.
She's in Los Angeles.
And the impressive sailboat journey of Desmond, which went from the Mediterranean to London and then sailing the entire Atlantic Ocean before sailing through the North Pacific Ocean just to deliver a message to Eloise Hawking. Okay, first things first, I'm gonna disregard what Lostpedia says on Desmond and Penny's sailboat journey. I think that the events with Desmond in Jughead does not coexist together with the other Season 5 off-island events. We're led to believe that this is chronologically at the same time as everything else, but this could have happened months prior to Ben and Jack's plan to get all of them back to the island. I think the events in the episode Jughead happened before Bentham's death, and there's nothing in the episode to contradict that. Sometimes in 2007, Desmond regains the memory of Faraday, and they are here. They are actually a little bit north of the Mediterranean. Thanks to the user SkySailingX on Reddit, I learned that this landscape is Puglia in Italy. Therefore, they are in the Adriatic Sea over here. They sail to London, and then it would take them several weeks until they cross the Atlantic Ocean, because that's how long it takes for a sailboat to cross the Atlantic Ocean. And during that time, John Locke dies. Another problem with the timeline I have is this.
Bentham's dead.
What?
2 days ago.
Everything in Season 5 starts from his death, and if Locke has only been dead for 2 days, then that leaves an immensely short time frame, because Saeed tells Hurley this the same night they're at the safe house. Does that mean in the span of 2 days, a maid found Locke's body, the story went to the press, then it would be printed and wound up on a newspaper that had to be on the plane that landed in Los Angeles, and then we should have the entirety of Through the Looking Glass in between, before this event and then this, It's not impossible, but it rubs me a little bit the wrong way. But it's so hectic. So let's try to lay down a timeline. There's been a lot of debate on when John Locke arrived in Tunisia. His passport said December 2007, which led many to believe that most of the stuff in Season 5 was happening in January 2008, and that everyone had packed down the Christmas decorations, and the 3 years later / earlier tag we got was just a rough estimate. But it's confirmed that the off-island events do happen in 2007.
So I think it feels like you're actually moving between off-island and on-island, but what you are seeing are flashbacks. These events happen in 2007 between Ben and Jack. These events on the island happen in 2004, or at least until the island starts moving. Then it's happening all over the place. But for these characters, they are separated by 3 years of experience.
And on this timeline, it says October. I can accept October much more than December. And even though we get a close-up of the prop, a prop is still a prop. If Locke wakes up in Tunisia in early October 2007, then that would give him time to find all of the survivors. For instance, in the span of like a week maybe, he would see Saeed in Santo Domingo, which would probably be a day's travel by plane, then half a day's travel to New York to see Walt, and then a plane ride to Los Angeles, where he would encounter both Hurley and Kate. By the time he lands in the hospital, Jack has some stubble, and even though he yells at Locke, Jack is already losing it. Remember, all of these scenes in the episode Something Nice Back Home has happened. Then there has to be some small time passage, and I also believe that there was a second scene with Jack, likely when Locke was checking out of the hospital, because there's some information that Jack tells Ben that Locke didn't tell him in this meeting.
He told me that after I left the island, some very bad things happened.
So by the time Locke sees Jack the second time, Jack might have already taken his golden pass to start flying, because he tells Kate that he's been flying a lot on every Friday night.
Been flying a lot.
What?
Yeah, that golden pass that they gave us, I've been using it every Friday night. I fly from LA to Tokyo or Singapore, Sydney.
Tokyo, Singapore, and Sydney are among the cities he's traveled to. So by the time Ben visits Locke and says that Jack booked a ticket,
Jack booked a ticket.
What?
A plane ticket from Los Angeles to Sydney, tonight.
that is one of the many tickets he has booked. We might be in November by now.
When did you speak to him?
About a month ago.
And that on these Fridays, Jack has been in Tokyo, Singapore, and Sydney, and maybe more. My main qualm about the timeline is that Locke's wounds are still fresh when he tries to kill himself. But the thing is that at least several weeks had to have happened for Jack to have been flying every Friday night. So I guess we have to deduce that the wounds just took a very long time to heal for Locke. That's actually quite fitting and juxtaposes his situation on the island. It would be impossible for this scene to be a couple of days before Locke's death, since there is 1. More information Locke hasn't told Jack, hence why an off-screen scene had to have happened. 2. Jack had to have been flying for at least 3 weeks. And 3. Jack's beard needed to be much bigger. By spacing things out and placing the Tunisia scene in October and this later, it also gives time for Jack to grow from a small stubble to the big beard. So even though the episode cuts directly from Jack yelling at Locke at the hospital to Locke's suicide scene, there is a substantial time jump between that time where Desmond finally crossed the Panama Canal and sailed up to the west coast to get to LA. I would also like to propose the idea that Ben might have given the wrong death date to Saeed, just to avoid any suspicion that it was him. So when Saeed says Bentham's been dead for 2 days, it might have been a couple more days.
Jack booked a ticket.
What?
I'm coming in.
How about a newspaper instead? And if you could buckle your seatbelt, sir?
It's an example, it doesn't matter, but it just gives a little bit more time for the newspaper to print the story and that the newspaper would be present on that flight that Jack took. I do understand that writing this episode might have been a challenge. You've set up all these meetings that were introduced in the season 4 finale, and the goal is to make an engaging story. Had it been a simple, repetitive meeting where Locke made sure to tell every single one that, "Hi, my name is Jeremy Bentham now, please refer to me as such in the future when talking to our friends who know me as John Locke," then that would get boring after a while. Instead, we have a nice progression and explore Locke's character. I think it's an amazing episode, although I find the timeline a bit frustrating. Let's travel to the island. Most of the stuff on Hydra Island I'm gonna cover in Namaste, but I want to mention one scene. The opening scene of this episode, when Caesar is going through Ben's office and Ilana comes in, was technically going to be the opening scene of season 5. That is pretty wild. It would follow the tradition of introducing new characters, and we would learn piece by piece where and when we are. And we get some foreshadowings, such as the hydrogen bomb test, as well as the fact that there is a new plane on the island, that some people have disappeared, and even that Locke is alive on the island. Pretty crazy. I think it would have been too many revelations too soon, so I'm happy it was shifted to this episode. It introduces us to Caesar. In the fall of 2008, when the actor Saïd Tahmanoui was cast, the French newspaper Allociné interviewed him about this role, where he said that he would be in 6 or 7 episodes this season and then be a series regular in season 6 with a pivotal role up until the series finale. This obviously did not happen, and his character was rumored to have been replaced by Zoe. This area we're in was filmed in Hawaii Film Studio and is a built set. It is very likely close to or next door to Isabel's office, since the design of these two offices are pretty similar. I want to address some things that Caesar finds. It includes the April 19, 1954 edition of Life magazine with the hydrogen bomb picture, but what's even more interesting is this blue folder, which was boarded up. And it includes a blurry map from the Dharma Initiative, Rousseau's aerial map, a photocopy of the Tempest map, and a photocopy of one of the pages from Daniel's journal. If it was boarded up with a lock in Ben's office, then that means that he hid these things and made sure they wouldn't be opened. This further emphasizes that the aerial map, which I and all other lost cartographers have based our maps on, is the true shape of the island and something worth keeping. Seeing as how Ben has called Danielle a lunatic, it is fascinating that this map was taken by the others and is worth locking up in a private box. But how did he acquire these things? The first map is so out of focus that we can't see anything, but it has a Dharma logo, and it could be just an area of the island or the sea. This has likely just been here for years. Rousseau's map was acquired by the others in late November 2004, when they seized the sailboat the Elizabeth. Remember, Saïd had the map on deck in this episode. But the two other things are more puzzling. The map of the Tempest is a copy of the one that Daniel had, now with a few Egyptian notations. And this schematic of space-time notations comes from Daniel's journal. It's originally written in a small journal, but has now been scanned and photocopied in black and white on A4 international paper size. How did Ben get this? Daniel had the journal on him all the time, and Ben left the island. I see two possibilities. During season 3, Michael was trying to acquire a lot of information on the freighter people. Both Tom and Michael helped. If any of them had the ability to find Daniel's journal and scan it, they could fax this to Ben's office on the island. For instance, if Michael was trying to gather information and names on the people on the boat, he could have snuck around and found a lot of personal belongings, faxed Ben both the map of the Tempest and pages from Daniel's journal in case the information was useful for Ben. Or maybe Tom got a hold of it back in the States. In this way, Ben would know that they know about the Tempest station, and then he would lock these items in his office. Or number 2, this one is a little bit more fun. If Daniel kept a tight grip on the journal and no one would be able to scan the pages during 2004, then that means that the journal traveled back in time to the 70s, and after Jack is handed the journal shortly before the incident as seen here.
Are you done with Faraday's journal?
Take it.
Jack would either leave it in the tunnels or lose it at some point, before traveling to the future. Jack and the rest of the group time jumps to 2007 after Caesar has found photocopies of the journal, so the journal had to have stayed behind for this theory to work. Then someone post-incident finds the journal again, maybe Eloise or Richard, and keeps it tight for numerous of years. Then someone scribbles down Egyptian hieroglyphs and they make photocopies of the pages and make sure they end up in Ben's office. And for all we know, these pages and resource map could have been locked in the office after Ben left the island. Since they are not opened until 2007, it had to have been at least until they acquired Resource Island map in November 2004. That's it for this week, a bit of an odd episode. Next week we'll be back on the island and explore the dark times in La Fleur.